Happy Sunday, everybody. Today we are looking at the Bachmann Sound Value SD45. All right, before we jump into the review of this thing, I got a bit of a disclosure to go over with it. I have had nothing but issues with this thing since I first got it, starting with the fact that about 3 seconds after I got it out of the packaging, my kid bumped me and I ended up dropping it. So there is some slight body damage that we'll go over here as we look at it, but don't hold that against the model. It just sucks. But anyway, we'll get to that when we get there. So let's go ahead and take a look at this thing up close and personal. So much like my review for the GP40, this is a bit of a departure from some of the quality standards that I have seen on Bachmann in the past. And for a brief second, when I got it out of the box, I was pretty happy with some of the details that I saw. If we take a closer look at the front of this here, the coupler lever, although broken right here, is intact over here and seems to be metal. It might not be. It probably was pretty strong, but this did take a pretty heavy fall, so let's not hold that against it. But we got MU hoses and whatnot, and the coupler up here, should it not have been broken off, had, air hose and whatnot. Something you don't see on this model is we don't have ditch lights, and that's kind of a disappointment. I would have liked to have seen ditch lights on this. The handrails are pre-painted, although I don't believe that Santa Fe had white handrails. I'd have to go back and look, but I don't think these yellow ones had white painted handrails. Excuse me. And then safety paint on the stairs going up on this. Since we're right here, the lights on this are actually pretty dim. They're not super bright. The rears are definitely brighter than the fronts, and some of the molded in detail is pretty nice. Like you can see some of the hand grabs back there. On top here, you can see a little bit of a hand grab too. Lit number boards, nice touch. The interior is not really an interior, it's just kind of an open space. There's no real in-cab detail. The handrails are relatively strong, front and rear, nice and thin comparatively. Up to, if you had a Kato up next to this, they're about the same thickness all the way across, so pretty good there. The yellow is nice and vibrant and looks nice. Something that should be noted is the cab portion is a different yellow than the rest of the actual model itself. So the nose and the cab end up being slightly different yellow than the rest of the unit. So that's a bit of a disappointment. The horns up here broke off, but they looked nice when they were there. The grill molding on this is pretty shallow but visible. The rear of the engine has better grill detail for sure. This is a SD45, one of the original ones, so it has the wide radiators. Something about this model, when looking at it right here, I had to actually go and do some sizing, and I learned something about SD45s that I was not aware of beforehand. And I should say that for SD40s as well, but I knew there was a physical difference between an SD45 and an SD45-2. The -2s do not have the flared rear radiators, and they had slightly different truck design. What I didn't know is that with that truck design, the trucks ended up being longer, and it added about 3 feet to the actual model itself. So when I was running this next to, say, a Kato, like the one that I have back here, it looked off in size because the Kato back here ended up being a little bit longer than the SD45. And that actually turns out to be correct. And if I measured them properly, they do come out to be roughly what they were supposed to be at 1/160th scale. The issue that I have with this is it ends up being just a little bit tall, and it looks weird running in consist with other engines. Also, the truck design on these is very blocky, and there's not a whole lot of depth to them. It's kind of just a flat piece of plastic. The rear one, you can kind of tell. It doesn't really look like a Telltale SD40 or SD45 truck. There's just something about it that seems off to me. There are pictures of this online, especially the Santa Fe one, that must show a demo model or a HO scale one, and the trucks look a bunch better, and the whole machine looks a little more in scale, and it's a little bit of a deceptive look of the engine, because if you do page through some of those online things, you will come across these where they show this in its actuality, and you can tell that it doesn't quite look right. All the other stuff on this tends to look pretty good. The door molding's all pretty decent. The walkways are okay. Compared to, say, some other Bachmans, the couplers on these are much shorter than normal. That's a nice thing to see as compared to like a Dash 8 right here. You can see the coupler sticks out substantially further. I did not order any replacement couplers for this. If I ever do put something on here, I'm going to do a microtrans conversion. I am not a fan of the big Bachmann knuckle couplers. One, they have the exposed spring that you can see there, and frankly, they work okay. They don't look that great. So yeah, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other on this. Some slight paint issues, the cab being off color to the rest of the machine. The paint in general is pretty vibrant, really. As compared to a Kato, this is a much brighter yellow. I honestly have never seen a new Santa Fe in relatively new paint. Even when I was a kid, they were all generally getting up there in age and getting dirty, so I couldn't tell you which is actually more accurate, but I do think this vibrant yellow does look better than, say, the Kato yellow. So before we talk electronics, because this is a sound locomotive, DCC of course, I want to talk about the actual physicality of this thing running around the track. I've had a bunch of issues with general reliability with this engine, and pickups don't seem to be the problem. Matter of fact, if you kind of look under there, I don't know if we can quite get the light correct on the new review area, but the pickups are wired directly to the frame, so I have zero pickup issues with this. This has been really good that way. I believe the truck design, the wheel flanges might be a little short as well for this type of wheel design, or this type of truck design, excuse me. It is, one, difficult to get this on the track properly, and it might be difficult to get on camera, but you set it down, you think you get it on there, and like in this current configuration, the front wheel is not actually on the track, even though it looks like it is. There we are. But several times around the loop, and eventually the front or the rear truck will end up in a position where it pops off the rail and derails. Now, I have checked with my NMRA gauge or whatever, the microtrains one. The wheels seem to be engaged pretty well. within margin of error. I think the flanges might be slightly short, but I've messed with it. I tried to see if the trucks were sticking in any position, and I couldn't quite get it to work out. It seems like they have more of an issue in the transition from flat to on a grade. Generally, that brings out the inconsistencies in any model, and it definitely does on this. It also definitely does not run as good on my tighter radius track, which is about I think it's 12 1/4 is what my my little inner loops are, as opposed to my big double track outer loops. I get a bunch more derailing on what I call my glacier loop. There is an area where you're coming across the bridge and it slightly tips down and there's a bit of a bump there, and every time this goes across that, it derails and shuts down the system. So yes, some of it is bad track laying, but a Kato doesn't deal with any of these issues. So I think it's bad truck design. One, they don't look good, and two, they just don't function that great. Oh, sorry about that. Had a bit of a coughing fit. Although I have had zero issues with the couplers on this being shorter than my other Bachmann engines. I was curious if I was going to have decoupling issues, and I'm happy to say I've had zero problems with that. So I think Bachmann could get away with running the shorter couplers on all of their equipment. Been super reliable that way. Let's go ahead and start talking about sound and the programmability of this engine. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this engine and its sound quality now. Oddly enough, I'll go through my struggles that I had programming this, but while programming the lights with JMRI, I lost all functionality on my throttle up, throttle down feature through function 5 and 6. I simply can't do it. So you'll have to go watch the pre-run or pre-review run to hear this thing spool up and spool down. It seems to work fine when in consist with another engine, but I cannot get it to work on its own anymore. I don't know if that is because I believe this is an economy soundtracks decoder in this. If it's something that's some sort of issue with JMRI that I maybe uncovered, but I can't seem to work the issue out of it. It's not the biggest deal. The actual throttle control sound does still function. This is not load based as far as I can tell. It is just simply whatever speed step you're on, eventually you'll throttle up, throttle down. This has one of the deal breakers that I brought up before. When muted, you do not have access to horn and bell. I hate that. I wish I could also, maybe there's a CV to change that. I couldn't figure it out. It is very complicated to learn new decoders and whatnot, and I honestly don't see myself getting a whole bunch of these, and honestly, soundtracks just isn't my favorite anyway, so I'm not going to put in a whole bunch of time into absolutely learning every nook and cranny of these decoders. There are other things out there that I am trying to do that on, but for the onesie-twosies of these that I'll have on my layout, it's just not worth it for me. So I rely solely on the easy stuff in JMRI, and I hate this. I wish all manufacturers could see the value in just being able to use the horn and the bell and maybe a couple other things while the rest of your sound features are muted. Kids love it when train comes by if you can honk at them, and I bring it up all the time, but my my layout is in the family room, so I don't want to be bothering everybody else with a bunch of engines being loud. Just want to be able to use that feature. when the train is actually running, I do think it has a nice horn. And the bell sounds pretty nice and has a good cyclic rate to it. Also shuts off quickly. There are other bells that kind of linger for a period of time. The mute on this is also pretty snappy, and all of the things completely silence themselves. That's one thing I dislike about some of the lock sound profiles, is some of them tend to linger with their sounds. So pretty decent for that. A couple of nitpicky things, but honestly I think Bachmann did a pretty good job putting together the sound file for this. It does sound like one of the two SD45s that we have locally in our area every once in a while running grain service. It definitely does sound like those. So good on you, Bachmann. You did a good job there. Let's go ahead and talk about the actual programmability and some of the issues I ran into on this thing while trying to make it a little more user-friendly for my layout. I picked up a Dash 8 finally. I had mentioned I was going to, and the reason why I've got it on the layout is I wanted to show some of the light features because I have them semi-disabled on the SD45. So from the factory, they have auto dim, auto bright, depending on whether or not you're moving the engine or not. It does work well, and that's all fine and good, except we'll keep the engine in the same orientation here. Notice the lights are on. We'll set her back on the layout here. And without touching anything, the rear lights are on. Either direction, both lights are on dim full time. Depending on direction, determines which one brightens. So forward direction, front is bright, rear is dim, vice versa for reverse. This is okay feature if you're doing switching, but on a road engine, I do not want that at all. Let me just quickly recall. So it took me quite a bit of time to actually program the having both lights on out of these engines, and I'm not sure if this is just a product of my setup, but it was very time consuming, and I don't think that I'm terribly ill-equipped to figure out some of this stuff. I'm pretty up to date with technology, and JMRI is an excellent tool. It's pretty basic, really, but I thought that I could just hop in there and start changing some settings and get it to work. And I tried it, and I tried it, and I tried it, and I just kept failing. The engine wouldn't take any of the programming stuff I tried to set on it. And at some point, I lost everything on this engine short of I still had sound and the engine moved, but that was it. I couldn't change any of my my CVs for speed through JMRI. Everything got cleared, and the engine was basically useless at that point. So I go ahead and reset the engine on my layout, using CVH or whatever, and then I took it back to JMRI and started programming again, and I kept getting error 308. And I'm not sure if it is because the system that I use, I have a lock programmer on a board for all of my lock sound equipped or ESU decoders, and right beside it I put together a DCC++ like Arduino setup, and it functions perfectly with all the other engines I use it for, other than these Bachmann engines just didn't seem to work with it. So I tried getting online and trying to determine if there is a correlation with Bachmann and the DCC++ system, and I really couldn't find any information. And so I kept playing with it, kept trying settings. I kept switching between the programming and then moving the wires over to the mainline track to see if that would change anything. And I just could not get these engines to program properly with GMRI. So I spent a little time reading through the Soundtracks manual, and I still found it difficult. I tried messing with some of the Rule 17 stuff to get this to function, and I just kept messing up my CVs. And again, I got the engine so out of whack, I ended up just resetting it to CV8 and starting over. After thinking about it a bit, I adjusted my idea a little bit and ended up hooking up JMRI through the ECOS that I run my my layout on, and I got on Wi-Fi, hooked up to it, and I started to program this on the main line, and all of a sudden JMRI could start to program this engine again. I think what it is the DCC++ system does not have enough current that can go through the programming track to actually get these particular sound locomotives to program properly, or maybe it's pulling so much current that the ping that goes back to the system to tell the the DCC++ system that the program happened successfully is getting lost in the noise per se. Either way, this was kind of a game changer. I started messing with some settings, and I couldn't totally get Rule 17 to work as I would want it to, but I ended up getting front headlight to function in forward, rear headlight or tail light to function in reverse, and so far everything's been pretty good ever since. So now forward, reverse, light turns off, everything functions properly there. So right on, that's all pretty cool. I still haven't figured out why I lost my throttle up, throttle down outside of a consist. When I'm in a consist, everything works right. I might have to just do another decoder reset, go back in there and do all of my light CVs and change my speed matching CVs on this. That's the other thing I ran into. This can be a little more finicky getting your speed match to function properly. I had spent a lot of time trying to get this thing to program, so I was kind of out of patience for it at that point, but it's the three engines that I have from Bachmann all use drastically different CV settings to get speed match, so it's not like my Katos and a TCS decoder where I can just put the same settings in every decoder, slap it in any engine, and everything functions properly. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to do an actual speed match on this to run it with your other engines. Programming issues aside, now that I got those figured out, I can't really hold that against Bachmann or the Soundtracks decoder that's installed on here. It must just be a current thing, so know that if you're using a DCC++ system or maybe some other lower current computer interfaces, you might need to look elsewhere. I just happened to luck out, and the system that I use as a DCC system can easily hook up to JMRI, and I can do my programming on the main line that way. So that could be an issue that you run into, just so you know. So programming issues aside, keep in mind that you might need something that's got a little more oomph than a DCC++ system, or if you have a built-in programmer, I'm not sure if the Digitrax quite has the oomph to do this either. So I just happened to luck out and have an ESU system that I can hook up to wirelessly with my computer and program through JMRI right on the main line. So saved me, could be a problem for other people, so just keep that in mind. Time to talk price point with this thing and performance, because frankly, this thing is not worth what Bachmann is charging for it. Depending on the road name or the road number you choose, I know there's like a CSX and a couple others that you can get this engine set up as, but $170 to $210 is kind of where I see this thing sitting at any given time. And frankly, it's just not worth it. The reliability issues that I run into with this thing is just unacceptable. Normally it's pickup issues with a lot of engines. They'd be intermittent, or there'd be areas in the track that they just would stumble on. This thing doesn't have any of those issues. It's completely and totally mechanical. I have had so many derailments with this thing. I've had it, tip other engines over because it gets so far off of the track before it ends up clipping short protection. Excuse me there. It's not even just like it's turnouts. It'll be coming around a corner and it'll just pop right off. That's just unacceptable for an engine in this price point, and it's missing a bunch of the features that other engines in this price range have. Higher end body detail like the Broadways and the Scale Trains engines, operating ditch lights, the ability to use the horn and bell functions without the volume on. It just is lacking so many things, and for that $170 to $210 price point, it better be pushing towards that 170, and it needs to have its reliability issues fixed. Now, this is my only one of these, but I have done some looking around online, and I have seen some other people complain about these things not following track very well. So I'm not the only person that has run into this issue. So frankly, unless this was, a $125 engine and there was maybe some stuff you could do to get it to function a little better, I can't see myself recommending this or ever buying another one. So yeah, just not a very good engine in my opinion. Anyway, thanks for stopping by, everybody. I will see you this Monday. I've had a sick kid for the last few days, so there's a little more work done on the layout here that I kind of had to do with him crying in the background. Kind of been dealing with that during this review, but I'm going to do some more work on it, and we're going to get that video put up for Monday, and I'll see you then. Have a good rest of your weekend.